I am again thankful to all news media outlets for letting me use their contents. I greatly appreciate that. I am available 24/7 if they need any assistance. Now go to the headlines. Hi and very warm welcome at Amir Shackle 5858. I am Amir Shackle. Following news headlines have been reported by world major English news channels and news agencies. So please watch it.
Tonight, the deadly dust storm whipping across Texas, the wall of high winds causing fatal crashes and tipping over semi-truck after semi-truck. Vehicles piling up on the highway, dangerous trail of wreckage, plus dangerous wildfires ripping through homes. Plus the powerful storm system putting 113 million at risk. The alerts for overnight tornadoes and baseball-sized hail. The fire aboard an American Airlines plane. The distress call from the cockpit, passengers evacuating onto the wing and running for their lives through the smoke. A key witness talking to authorities about that missing student on spring break. He may have been the last person to see her. Jesse Kirsch is in the Dominican Republic with the latest tonight. Another Columbia University student protester arrested by federal agents and newly released video of the arrest of protest leader Mahmoud Khalil. Markets bouncing back after a wild week in response to President Trump's trade war. The president making a rare speech to the Department of Justice going after the prosecutors who charged him. The SpaceX crew ready for liftoff again on a mission to bring home astronauts Butch Wilmore and Sonny Williams. And the good news, the music and hope coming back to kids impacted by those LA wildfires.
Fox News alert. We now know 9 Democrats have voted to break the filibuster, which is how many were needed. The vote is still open. They only needed 8, already to 9. The total vote has to get to 60. So we're still watching that, and we'll continue to keep you updated on that in the Senate. But now joining me is the founder of Turning Point US, Charlie Kirk. What's up, Charlie?
Will, great to see you. Thanks for having me, man.
I'm glad to have you. I haven't spoken to you personally. I know you were with Sean Hannity the other night. You sat down with Gavin Newsom. You sat down on his inaugural episode for his new podcast, let's call it his mainstream washing back into politics. You came out of that going, he's clearly running for president. And what I think you said that was correct is we better take him seriously.
Oh, yes, everyone should be very beware. Look, he understands one thing about the Democrat Party that most other Democrats don't quite recognize, that their ideas are not going to work in a midterm or a general election. Now, we must understand that Gavin Newsom is a terrible governor, one of America's worst, if not America's worst, and very, very slippery. But he has very good political instincts where he knows on the issue, for example, of men and female sports, that they have to move to the middle on that he has to try to calm down some of the radical open border rhetoric. I don't believe any of his, just like he has any, that this is a true conversion. But I do think it's interesting because there's a debate going on within the Democrat Party right now of whether or not they're going to moderate themselves or they're going to double down on their core, out-of-touch, unpopular, progressive values. And you look at the very fundamental issue of should biological men be able to play in women's sports? Just for saying that he agrees with me on his podcast, he received backlash from major Democrats, from senators, from governors for that very simple statement where 80% of Americans are with us on the common sense side of that issue.
Charlie, for me, he comes off as nakedly and transparently ambitious and nakedly and transparently politician, but that doesn't mean he's bad at it. He's good at it. And look, you go everywhere. You go to college campuses. You take everyone on in debate, which I love and respect. I have to say he was ready to not to take you on, but there's a bravery because you're really good at this, Charlie. You're really good at debating. And I thought one of his tactics was really smart.
To
Tonight we have breaking news as we come on the air. The life-threatening storm hitting multiple states right now. There are tornado watches as we come on. The highest level of severe tornado risk at this hour. States of emergency now in effect. 120 million Americans on alert for possible long-track tornadoes, large hail and damaging winds, gusting up to 100 miles per hour. A blinding storm blamed for a massive pileup, more than 40 vehicles, big rigs blowing over in the wind. From the south into the Midwest and the Northeast, all bracing. Link over, timing this out. Also tonight, the harrowing images here, the engine on fire, passengers on the wing of an American Airlines jet. The engine began to vibrate just 30 minutes into the flight. They diverted to Denver, the flames then erupting while on the tarmac. The major development tonight, that Pittsburgh college student disappeared on spring break. Tonight, the last person believed to see her alive, and the interview transcript in which he describes saving her in the ocean, making it to shore, and what he says is the last thing he remembers. Just in tonight, for the first time, ABC News obtaining the dramatic 911 call from a surviving student in the Idaho College murders, calling from the home. You will hear the call and the description of the scene. Tonight, President Trump at the Department of Justice with his new Attorney General suggesting his political enemies should be in jail. Tonight, the 10th Senate vote to avert a government shutdown. We'll go live to the Hill. The war in Ukraine, and James Longman tonight with extraordinary access to the vast underground hospital treating injured Ukrainian soldiers and what they say about this U.S. push for a ceasefire and whether to believe Vladimir Putin. And tonight here, the baby boom, the baby giraffe and the baby leopard, 2 American zoos and 2 teams tonight caring for these very rare babies. And you'll see them. From ABC News World Headquarters in New York, this is World News Tonight.
On this Friday night, Canada's new Prime Minister, Mark Carney, is sworn in along with his cabinet. We're a very focused government. What this means for the carbon tax and what he could call an election. 51st state debate. America's top diplomat defends Trump's talk during a G7 summit in Quebec. We'll tell you who's sticking up for Canada. Elbows up. Tourism.
Canadians love to travel, but they're angry.
Canadian staycations are causing a local business boom, and why Americans are also coming to Canada. Plus, another frightening flight.
Oh my God!
The rush to escape this burning passenger plane.
Global National. Reporting tonight, Jeff Semple. By Mark.
Emergencies in Swiss politics and finance.
John Zaracostas, one of the 200 France 24 correspondents around the world.
Good morning to you all. Welcome to Daybreak here on France 24. My name's Peter O'Brien, and here are your headlines. Europe accuses Russia of disregarding the US's ceasefire proposal for Ukraine after talks between Vladimir Putin and an American diplomat. Anti-government protests in Serbia this Saturday could be the biggest yet, with thousands already arriving in Belgrade from around the country. And the next International Space Station crew has lifted off early to reprieve 2 American astronauts that have been stuck at the station for 9 months. Let's get you first the latest on a possible ceasefire in
Hello, good afternoon. I'm Yasmin Yonkers with your headlines this hour. Former Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte attends his first international criminal court hearing in The Hague via video link. He's facing crimes against humanity charges over his deadly crackdown on drugs. His daughter, the Vice President Sara Duterte, repeating assertions that he'd been kidnapped.
If you
talk to lawyers, they call it extraordinary rendition, but for a family member like me, that's kidnapping. That's forcibly taking my father to another country and illegally arresting him.
U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio announces visa bans against Thai government officials for their role in deporting dozens of Uyghurs back to China last month. Mr. Rubio cited China's, quote, long-standing acts of genocide against the Uyghur Muslim minority, and China has rejected those accusations. Meantime, China and Russia backing Iran in its refusal to return to nuclear talks with the U.S., Beijing stressing that sanctions reimposed during President Donald Trump's first term in office must first be lifted. And those are your latest headlines from the CNA Newsroom.
Africa News. The news. A woman in South Africa lost her life due to severe flooding in Pinetown on Friday. Rescue teams are currently working to clear debris in the affected areas. The floods have claimed at least 31 lives, with 22 fatalities reported in KwaZulu-Natal near Durban and 9 in Gaborone, the capital of Botswana, including 6 children. More than 5,000 people have been displaced as a result of the disaster. Authorities are urging residents to avoid unnecessary travel and to stay away from low-lying areas. The flooding, which impacted both Botswana and South Africa from February 16th to 20th, caused significant disruptions, including the closure of major border crossing into South Africa, the temporary suspension of all government schools in Botswana, and severe traffic congestion. Many regions have become completely cut off, leaving residents stranded and emergency services facing challenges in their response efforts.
Around 1,300 Southern Africa Development Community SADC soldiers are preparing to leave Congolese soil as the M23 backed by Rwanda advances. Despite some diplomatic sanctions, Kigali remains firm, claiming it is defending its sovereignty. According to Congolese analyst Christian Moleka, this approach lays the groundwork for instability in the fragile and mineral-rich East. The complexity of the Congolese issue is that the stakeholders have always engaged in a balancing act, a form of tightrope walking, where one point is given to Kinshasa and another point is given to Kigali. This balanced approach is unfavorable to Kinshasa, while pressure, the necessary diplomatic action, the first sanctions, and clear accusation against Rwanda were directed at Kinshasa. Rwanda also received some small points that balance both parties. This position, unfortunately, will not fundamentally resolve the problem. It may calm things down today, but at some point, the international community must acknowledge that there is an aggressor and a victim. The Congolese security apparatus have always hinted at lack of finances and resources. During their capture of Goma and Bukavu, the M23 succeeded in recruiting dozens of soldiers who had also fled the National Front. Important reforms need to be made in the security apparatus. There need to be internal cohesion, return to calm within the country, and this will depend on the president's ability to maneuver, to have the political levers to build true internal cohesion, reduce the sources of internal conflict, and implement the necessary reforms, especially in military command, to have a capable army. Kinshasa still has strong reservations about participating in direct negotiation with the M23 under the auspices of Rwanda. For Christian Maleka, the DRC is forced to accept the dialogue. At worst, the government could try to delay the deadline by claiming the M23 is raising its demands. But Kinshasa has very little room to maneuver in not going to Rwanda. International diplomatic pressure are also on Kinshasa to open up the possibilities for direct negotiations. We saw in Resolution 2773 at the African Union and at the joint EAC SADC summit, which calls for direct negotiations. There is also an underlying reality. The M23 in South Kivu continues to advance. Yesterday, it was reported that this island of Ijwi had been reclaimed by the M23, and so the fear is that the fighting will spread towards Kindu, Maniema, Shopo, Kisangani, or Katanga. This risk of fighting spreading is also weighing on Kinshasa. Meanwhile, the security and humanitarian situation remains tense in several cities in North Kivu. The M23 is still being seen advancing in several villages in the region.
A British national has died in Kenya after being hit by a government vehicle from President William Ruto's motorcade. 79-year-old Edgar Charles Frederick was struck on Thursday as the motorcade was travelling to a public event in Nairobi. The driver was arrested but later released on cash bail, according to police. The British High Commission is working with Kenyan authorities. The incident sparked outrage online, with many questioning the speed of the motorcade on a busy road. Videos from the scene show Frederick lying on the tarmac with severe head injuries, and the vehicle involved didn't stop. Police say high-speed driving is standard for security reasons during motorcades. Frederick was visiting family in Kenya. A post-mortem will be conducted to determine the cause of death. Former FC Barcelona defender Gerard Piqué is answering questions in an investigation into the deal that brought the Spanish Super Cup to Saudi Arabia. The probe focuses on potential corruption and money laundering linked to a 2019 agreement by former Federation President Luis Rubiales. The deal secured a 10-year contract to host the tournament in Saudi Arabia for $43 million annually, with $4 million going to Piqué's company Cosmos while he was still playing. Piqué denies any wrongdoing. The investigation began in 2022 after leaked audio about commissions. Rubiales denied any wrongdoing in 2024, and Piqué was placed under investigation. The case is ongoing, with a decision pending on whether to go to trial.
Thanks, Bev. A very good evening to you. Our top stories. President Trump says the US has had good calls with both Russia and Ukraine today, but says it's not easy to agree a ceasefire deal. He also gave himself credit for bringing both sides to the negotiating table.
I want to get it stopped, and we've had some very good calls today with Russia and with Ukraine. They've agreed for a ceasefire if we can get it with Russia, and it's not easy. It's a tough one, but I think we're doing it.
Foreign ministers from the G7 nations, including Great Britain and the US, have backed Ukraine's territorial sovereignty and have warned Russia to accept a 30-day truce or face the threat of further sanctions. In a joint statement, they indicated Ukraine would need security guarantees to guard against future Russian aggression. These statements aimed at showing unity following weeks of tension between US allies and President Trump over trade, security and Ukraine. Foreign Secretary David Lammy says the ball is now in Vladimir Putin's court.
Now is the time for a ceasefire with no conditions. Ukraine has set their position out. It is now for Russia to accept it. I think that there is a coalition of the willing emerging to give Ukraine the security architecture and arrangements that they need.
Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky believes the US can apply enough pressure on Russia to end the war, but has warned that Vladimir Putin will try to endlessly prolong it. Putin has suggested ceasefire talks are beginning to move following a meeting with Donald Trump's top envoy in Moscow yesterday, and says he'll guarantee the safety of Ukrainian troops in Kursk if they surrender. Meanwhile, the Prime Minister has spoken to the leaders of France and Norway ahead of a meeting of world leaders tomorrow to discuss sending international peacekeepers to Ukraine. At Downing Street, Sir Keir Starmer and Emmanuel Macron discussed the significant breakthrough on peace talks. The Prime Minister will chair a virtual meeting of the so-called Coalition of the Willing. Russia has denounced plans to send international troops to Ukraine. Well, away from Ukraine, the UK economy shrunk by 0.1% in January in a blow to the government ahead of its spring statement. The Office for National Statistics says the unexpected drop in GDP was driven by a sharp fall in manufacturing, although retail sales were up. Forecasters had been expecting a slight increase. Business leaders say trade frictions are causing concern and uncertainty. Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, has said she is working to improve the economy. Former Met Police officer David Carrick appeared at the Old Bailey accused of multiple sex attacks on a woman and a teenage girl. The 50-year-old has previously denied 2 counts of rape, 1 count of sexual assault, and 1 count of coercive and controlling behaviour in relation to the woman between 2014 and 2019. He's also denied 5 counts of indecent assault on a girl under 16 between 1989 and 1990. Carrick has been remanded in custody until a further hearing in June. Between 1990, Carrick has been remanded in custody until a further hearing in June. And Marcus Rashford and Jordan Henderson have been named in Thomas Tuchel's first England squad for the World Cup qualifiers later this month. Rashford's been rewarded for his good form on loan at Aston Villa for Manchester United. Tuchel's named players at the opposite ends of their careers, with the 35-year-old Henderson recalled. He last played for England in November 2023. There's a first call-up as well for the 32-year-old Newcastle defender Dan Burn in your picture now, and they'll play alongside Arsenal's 18-year-old Miles Lewis-Skelly. Harry Kane will continue as captain, and the newish manager Thomas Tuchel has described Henderson as a serial winner. He also said Burn's selection long overdue. That's it for the moment. More from me in an hour's time.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR.
Hello, a very good morning. It's 6 o'clock. Coming up on the show today, the 8-day mission that turned into 9 months in space. Well, now finally, a replacement crew is sent to the International Space Station to relieve 2 astronauts stuck there. And ahead of his first race in the red of Ferrari, we'll find out where Lewis Hamilton will start on the grid in Australia. They're in the current final stages of qualifying, and it's advantage Max Verstappen just now. It's all happening. It's Saturday, the 15th of March. The US launches a rocket to the International Space Station to bring back 2 stranded astronauts. The Prime Minister accuses Vladimir Putin of playing games with the future of Ukraine ahead of a virtual summit with world leaders. Also this morning, why young people with autism say they feel abandoned by mental health services. And in sport, Rory McIlroy is in contention for a second title at the Players' Championship, despite 2 bogeys on his final 4 holes. Hello, a very good morning. Thanks for joining us here on The Breakfast Show.
On ABC and ABC iView.
Today, Russia says it'll spare Ukrainian forces in Kursk if Kyiv surrenders following ceasefire talks with US President Trump.
I've asked them not to let anything happen, and I hope that nothing happens.
Also ahead, rallies held across the country to honour the lives of women lost to gendered violence. Temperatures soar as a heatwave sweeps across multiple states with high fire danger expected.
We'll see much. These temperatures up to 12 degrees above the March average.
And a SpaceX rocket blasts off as the mission to retrieve NASA's stranded astronauts begins. Hello and welcome to ABC News. I'm Melissa McKay.
Thank you very much for giving time to Amir Shekel 5858. I am Amir Shekel. Have a good life. Bye-bye.